Hello there. Really good to be with you after what seems like an eternity. But I'm here again. I'm glad to be here. I'd like to talk with you today about a wonderful word, a beautiful word, one of the best words in the English language that I know of. And that word is serendipity. Serendipity. And if you're not familiar with that word and you're not quite sure what it means, it simply means to come upon an unexpected treasure, to chance upon an unexpected treasure. I remember as a young man, that's what happened to me. I chanced upon an unexpected treasure. We lived at that time in a small mining village in the northeast of England, right by the seaside. And we watched the buckets, the overhead buckets from the local colliery bring the rubbish and the dirt and the refuse from the pit bottom and tip it into the ocean, tip it into the sea. And along with that rubbish, excuse me, and that dirt, there was mixed in with it fine particles of coal, which were too difficult to gather up. But the sea would take the stones and the rubbish and separate them, and the fine particles of coal would also be separated. And when there was a storm at sea, they would bring the coal and throw it up on the shore, and people used to gather the coal. And my father was a coal miner, but in his spare time, together with myself, I used to help him. I guess I must have been about 12 or 13 at the time. Used to help him gather the coal from the sea, scrape it up in shovelfuls with a horse and cart, bring it up onto higher ground out of the reach of the tide, and we would make extra money from doing that. Some people lived that way, but we did it in our spare time. One day, my father had come in from the night shift. He sent me out because there had been coal for them from the previous few tides. He sent me out with a shovel in hand to see if I could get my share of what the sea brought up that day. And so I went out and stood along with a whole line of men. I guess there must have been a dozen or 15 or so others, waiting for the tide to recede and leave behind a lovely portion of coal stranded on the beach. Well, to everyone's disappointment, that day there was nothing at all, no coal that day. And one by one, the men went away, and I was left alone by myself, and decided as I was on my way home, I walked by the riverside. The river estuary was there, and so I wandered up by the riverside. And to my amazement, as I rounded the bend of the river, I saw a huge bank of coal that had been left by the tide and the river diminishing. And I was absolutely amazed. And to me, that was a moment of serendipity, chancing upon the unexpected find. Well, I was overjoyed and quickly put my mark on the coal and did what I could to rustle it up and put it into heaps. One of the men, as he was leaving, saw me in the distance and ran over to see what was going on. And to his surprise, I got the whole bunch of coal that day. The whole portion of coal, I'd got the lot that day. And he said to me, "Go on, son, go and get your father, and I'll look after this for you." And so he did. And I was delighted to run home and tell my father what had happened. He didn't believe me at first. The amount of coal I had was enough for a working man's wage at that time for a whole week or more. And I was absolutely delighted and overjoyed. The next story I had was probably another, on chancing upon an unexpected treasure, was even greater by far. And this time was about 19. I'd been to church about 9 months before, had not liked it one bit, and said to myself as I walked out the door, "I'm never going to church again." In fact, the pastor asked me if I'd enjoyed the service, and I said, "No, I didn't," and off I went. Well, my life went from bad to worse, and I thank God for that, friends, because it's those times when you begin to think about life and about the things that really matter. And I began to think about my life, and I began to get lower and lower in life. Things began to get worse and worse. Thank God they did, because there's a verse in the Bible that says, it's the goodness of God that leads you to repentance. And finally I was at the end of my road, end of the line as far as I was concerned, and I accepted a lift late one Saturday night from someone driving home to where I used to lodge, and they gave me a lift, and as I got out of the car they handed me a piece of paper, and I looked at it and I said, "What's that?" And they simply said to me, "Well, you'll find out." And so off I went and stood under a street lamp and read that piece of paper, and as I looked, something inside me said, "You're going to church tomorrow." I thought, going to church? Yes, that's what I need. And up I went. The next day I grew up and I thought, coming along, and I thought, I'm not going to church today. What a ridiculous thought. But as the day went on, more and more that voice came to me. You're going to church today. You're going to church tonight. By that time I moved to a different town, and I didn't know where the nearest church was. It had been a Pentecostal church I'd visited 9 months before, and here I was in a different town, not knowing where to go. But sure enough, later on that evening, I went on the local bus in the town centre and stopped a group of Salvation Army men and women and asked them where the nearest Pentecostal church was. And they gave me directions. And one of them said to me, "You'll be all right there." He didn't know, but that was such a reassuring word. It was like a bolt from heaven, a word from God himself. You'll be all right there. And it was there that night I surrendered my life to Christ. I didn't know what had happened to me until the elder took me into the vestry and began to pray with me and tell me it's the story of how things began, how God walked with man in the beginning, and they walked together and had fellowship and they enjoyed each other's company. But man turned his back on his friend, turned his back on God the Almighty, decided to go his own way. But God still loved him and sent his own son to pay the penalty and the price for that man's sin so that he could be reconciled with his Creator. But as he was talking to me, I was aware of a light coming from behind him, and the love that was coming from behind him was absolutely immense. And I knew there's someone else standing there. I knew that was God, that was the Lord, and he loved me, he'd forgiven me, and I didn't want to stay in that place. I wanted to get out there, take that love, that forgiveness with me, and I went out and I literally skipped and danced up the road to the bus stop, feeling that love and that peace and that joy welling up within my spirit. We have a supernatural God, and I could not have come any other way but a supernatural way. Religion's not enough, friends. You have to have an encounter with the living God. And I did that night, and that's more than 50 years ago. And he's more real to me, just as real and more today than he was that night. Thank God that he's just the same. He says, I am the Lord, I change not. And Jesus Christ is the same, yesterday, today, and forever. I hope you've enjoyed these few remarks on serendipity and what it meant to me in my life when I chanced upon an unexpected find. God bless you.